Okay. Well, good morning. I'm Jacqueline King, General Secretary of the Queensland Council of Unions, and we're here in Cairns today to talk to local people about the increases to cost of living and impact of prices through the Australian Council of Trade Unions price gouging inquiry. Before I formally start, though, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are meeting here today and pay our respects to their elders past and present, and to acknowledge Tommy Sebastio, who is with me here as a witness this morning as a proud First Nations man from Bamaga. I'll leave you to introduce yourself, Tommy, as well, but we'll come to that. This morning, we've also hearing from a number of other people about, I guess, the pressures that individuals are facing. So working families, small businesses, pensioners, everyone who's doing it really tough at the moment. We've seen real wages are depressed. In fact, they've gone backwards in terms of cost of living in the last couple of years. That's certainly been confirmed by the Fair Work Commission for low-wage employees, but also average wages are just not keeping up with the cost of living. At the same time, we've got increases to housing, so mortgages and rent, but also food prices, transport prices, energy. We're hearing insurance, health costs to go and see a local GP, and also education costs. These are all contributing to the stress on everyday families. And one of the things and the reasons why we've come here to Cairns has been to look at, I guess, the impact of what this means for regional Australia and in particular regional Queensland. So just about the same amount of people live outside of Brisbane in regional Queensland as who do live in Brisbane. Cairns is a long way from Brisbane. It's the same on an airplane to fly from Brisbane to Melbourne as it was to fly from Brisbane to Cairns. And those additional transport kind of costs just into the Cairns region itself are obviously also a concern. But we also want to hear from our First Nations people and other people who live in community in the Cape about what are the additional things that they face because they're even more remote, and those transport costs, I think, are particularly concerning, which are driving up prices right across the board. So it's that added disadvantage that regional Australia has and then remote communities have. So I might leave it at that to open and introduce yourself, Tommy. So Tommy Sebastio, you're down here from Bamaga today. How long did it take you to get here?
It took me about 10 hours of driving, get down here. 10 hours of driving. I had to buy fuel to come down at $2.87 a litre.
$2.87 a litre.
Yeah,
wow.
At Bamaga. That's not as bad as out in the Torres Strait Islands, where they're past $3 easy,
right,
per litre for fuel. And of course, being an island, they need fuel to travel around. They don't have cars between inter-island travel to go hunting, supplement their diets and all that. And also with the fuel as well, they travel to maintain their cultural connections. And when that can't happen, you have a bit of disintegration of culture.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time. That is an extraordinary amount of time to come and dedication. Can you tell us, though, about what do you do? So you're an electrician, electrical power station worker?
That's right. I was an electrician for the last 30 years plus. I was an electrician for the Supply Authority. I've now moved to a newer role of engagement, First Nation engagement advisor to Energy Queensland. But in all the years that I've been up, I've worked up in the remote area of Bamaga, which is home, come across things that I've seen, and always been questioned on my mind. Two questions. One is it lawful or is it ethical? And a lot of us to do with the price of living,
Mhm.
price of staying alive, price of keeping our culture alive. You know, we need this interaction, and that's what it is. It's connections all the time with the people, the family.
Okay. All right. So can you tell us, at the moment, is it the cost of living, is it worse or is it the same as what it was, say, 10 years ago?
It certainly is worse. I think 10 years ago, we probably had some more people employed. We have less people employed. We have, I guess, more people relying on our social welfare, and from there, because it's this struggle, to provide for the family, to meet all the obligations of the family. And sometimes when you can't, it's one family member or two family members, you can't contribute. You then sort of you feel like a failure because you're not contributing to the family. There is cultural pressure to provide for the family.
Yeah.
And if you can't meet your obligation because you're unemployed or your cost of living is too high for you to buy stuff to come together and meet your obligations, then you feel a little bit bad, and then there's this bad blood in the family.
Right. Yeah. It's okay. So it's a lot harder for families across the board. What is it like in terms of some just food costs and things like that? What are you seeing?
I was one of my nieces on Facebook put that she bought about nearly $700 worth of shopping, and it didn't even last a week. She mentions there was a number of bags. It wasn't that many.
Yeah.
So
a lot more than what you'd be paying here in Cairns itself.
Yes. Yeah. Cairns is a hub. Table Lane's up at Atherton Table Lane, where they have all these. It's probably a good vegetable and fruit, sort of, growing up that way. It's we don't get the food that comes to us. They get up to us, especially the fruit and vegetable, after they've maybe 5 days.
Right.
So they're not as fresh.
So it's not as fresh.
Not as fresh.
Yeah, and the price is obviously more.
Yeah. And of course, you go and you probably get lower quality. Because probably they get best prices down here for local stuff.
And so tell me, how does things like food or other goods get transported into Bamaga?
Nearly all of the goods go up by sea freight, Sea Swift.
So Sea Swift has a government contract to deliver?
Yes, they have a government contract to deliver. They also have a contract to deliver fuel up there for the power station. So they're the routine run that they do to meet the government's obligation for supply electricity. But and with that, they also twice a week they're going to NPA, and I think at Thursday Island as well. And I think it's once a week out to the outer islands.
Right. Right. So it's fair to say that all of the communities are solely reliant on Sea Swift bringing in the majority of goods and food and goods.
Yes. Yeah. By plane, it's too expensive.
Yeah.
And at the moment, we don't have a reliable road transport to take things up. Up to NPA and maybe distribute from there to the outer islands. It'd get there fresher.
Yeah.
And it'd probably be a lot cheaper, but
yeah. Okay. And so can you tell us sort of anything about the cost of housing and that in Bamaga and what that's like to live there for people?
For Bamaga, it's mainly state, so welfare housing to most, and council. There's very little privately owned just to do with the ownership of the land and all that. But on Thursday Island, the cost of living on Thursday Island, it's quite expensive there, unless if you're trying to get private rent and rent privately and all that, they're paid through your teeth for it. A lot of the places that have been rented out there now are rented for government workers,
right,
or other big businesses,
mm-hmm.
and they can afford. I don't know how they recuperate the costs or whatever, but they can afford to do that. But if you just look across the other side of the island at Torres Strait, on Thursday Island, that's where the Torres Strait Islanders live. They at the back of the island, and they do have their houses there, but it's all they rent from housing.
Right.
And the housing they don't quite meet the need of the family.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of pressure in the housing from extended families living there. Yeah.
So you've got all that pressure. You're already swimming against the tide,
mm-hmm.
and then you've got unfair pricing and price gouging.
Yeah.
Just it's a bit hard to stand up. You're one knee on the ground, the other one trying to stand up on one leg.
Yeah. Okay, so how can I ask you a personal question? How many people are you supporting off your wage?
Me, I'm supporting my daughter.
Yep.
Only the one, but where I can, I help out with family, or not necessarily family, but other people in the community as well. Yes. I give other support in form of sort of mentoring.
Yeah.
Through a union worker, pass information across, try to improve working conditions for our people up there.
And so what do you see, Tommy, is do you see any answers to this? What if you're asking from government, whether that's federal government or state government, what are the sorts of things that you think that you need to make things better in community?
Well, the fact of living with a question mark over your head all the time, we want some answers. Why is it so expensive? Why is freight so expensive? Why is the a kilogram of mince $19 a kilogram?
So $19 a kilogram for mince.
For mince, yeah.
Wow.
Why is 45 kilogram of LPG, cooking gas? Why is it nearly $400?
So that's a large.
That's a large one, yeah.
So it's about $150 where I live, and you're saying it's $400.
Why is it $400? Why is Australian gas?
Wow.
It's our gas is taken out.
And where does that gas come in from, and who are you buying it from? So is it L gas or? Yeah. So it's L gas.
L gas, yeah.
Yeah, and does it come in on Sea Swift?
Coming on Sea Swift.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
They're better off housing better off giving us wood fire stove, and we go get plenty of wood.
Yeah.
Keep us busy. We'll be a lot fitter and leaner.
Yeah.
And food tastes better when you cook it on.
Yeah, wood fire stove. Yeah, that's crazy though.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there's a heavy reliance on fuel, and so you've said the price of fuel there. We've got a price of gas. What else are you sort of seeing in terms of increased costs?
Increased costs it'd be for fruit and vegetable.
Fruit and veggies,
yeah.
And they're not good quality when they get to the islands,
to start off with,
or to Bamaga, yeah.
But it's hard to pack a good lunch for the kids with good food,
good nutrition,
because it's nutrition, because of the price.
Because of the price, okay. So can I ask about health costs? So are there local Is there a local GP in Bamaga? Health service?
Yeah, we've got the health service there. We've got another NGO that actually runs a separate health thing than what the Department of Health does, and they're very effective as well. On that part, it's good. It's the it's the same thing again. You know, you're trying to maintain good eating habits, but you can't afford it because it's too expensive. So you end up, you know, eating stuff that's going to be, you know, turn you into a diabetic, or you know, or if you've got any other underlying chronic problems, it's sort of hard to break out of that cycle if you can't afford to get decent, decent food.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, is there anything else that sort of, you know, I guess, you know, you want government to be able to listen to you and explain why there's these increased prices, but do you think there's ways that they can intervene? You know, is there an issue there with, you know, you've already identified C-Swift has the contract for all of the freight going into the communities. So there's obviously a lack of competition issue. But isn't C-Swift subsidised by the Queensland government already?
If it is, I'd like to know in what areas, you know,
and where the money's going.
I don't know whether they subsidise the other the shops that they actually own as well, that they run, and whether they just
So C-Swift actually has shops.
No, the government.
The government.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that? So who's actually running, like, who actually owns the stores for, you know, food and groceries and basic essential services?
Yeah, government-owned stores. There's one at Magical, it's in the NPA. Another one in Bamaga. The one down at Seysa is run by Seysa Enterprise, which is a you know, not-for-profit organisation. And there are other places that like Servos and that run by non-government, not-for-profit organisations. It's just a matter of, okay, you're making that much money. We don't see that much money being put back in the community.
Into the community.
They seem to have a management company that manages it for the community, and they take quite a bit out in profit. And so maybe if we have another way of doing this, we might have cheaper food.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cheaper products there.
All right. So it's fair to say we need urgent relief into your communities to relieve the cost of living. So right across the board.
Very much so.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
Look, overall, if we don't deal with this, it will chip away and erode cultural values, and for us, First Nation people, where it's all about culture. If we chip away and then we end up, you know, the culture slowly dies, you know, and go away, then we're just going to be lost. You know, we'll be like a piece of paper being blown down the road. You know,
so your connection to country is really important. It's more important than anything.
Yes.
Yeah, and family. Yeah. Okay.
There are some other things that can be done as well. It's too much red tape. You know, you said, okay, there's some land there we want to farm. Oh, but you need this, you need to do that. Just let us farm the land how we used to do it traditionally.
Okay, so a little bit more self-autonomy to do things as a community.
Yes.
Yeah, and that might actually help you with growing fresh produce locally as well.
Well, that's the dream. I used to do it before when I was a kid. Why we're not doing it now? We got more machinery and more smarts and that. I don't know. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's already been done.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a pretty clear, you know, start in that space there as well.
Yeah. I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if this inquiry goes ahead and we find people that have done something unlawful, what do you do about that? And if we find out it's unethical, what can be done about that?
Well, I think so. Professor Alan Fells, who's the former head of the ACCC, is actually chairing this inquiry, and he'll be writing the final report up for the ACTU. So I think it's interesting to have someone like him on board, because he does understand that whole competition pricing side of market. So I guess if there's things as, illegal practices that may be exposed, that they can be referred to appropriate processes. But I think the biggest thing coming out of this is actually hearing people's real stories, right? Because that doesn't seem to be coming through in the media. We hear all of the time, big bank profits, corporate profits. This is a great thing for Australia. Well, like, we're not when we talk to ordinary Australians, and and when we go into community, it's even worse, right? So getting those stories out there, that's about the answer to your ethical question, and getting those stories in front of politicians in Canberra and in Brisbane, and to listen to what's really happening, to come together. I think personally, I think in terms of First Nations communities, one of the lessons that we need to heed from this year is that we need to be able to be doing some practical things in community, and allowing people like yourself and elders and community to come together to do those practical things locally, and empower you to do that, as opposed to make decisions from 1 William Street in Brisbane, or or Parliament House in Canberra. So I think we want to start a journey in this space anyway, and I think storytelling is a very powerful medium to do that.
Yeah, I said re-empower our elders. We don't want them to be made redundant. We want them back in there. They're the captain of the ship. They keep putting somebody else on the helm, and we end up running on a reef, running aground, or sinking the ship.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming, and for your time this morning. Sorry that I'm not going to be here for the dinner tonight on the weekend, so hopefully next year. But thank you for all of your hard work that you do, and I know you're a proud member of the Electrical Trades Union. So, brothers in arms. Very,
So, where there's a good fight, ETU will spot
the
up there.
ETU will, far up that way. Yeah. Okay.
Even the bad ones, we show up there.
We're all good. We're all good. All right. Okay.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
I shall now go to bed.
Yes. Get some well-earned sleep. Okay. All right. So our next witness is Anne Kreger. Anne is a retired unionist here in Cairns. Can you tell us a little bit about your own background?
Oh, well, whether you want my union background, I was very active in was before we had the midwives in with us, but the
Queensland Nurses Union?
It was in WA, actually.
Okay,
so it was the
ANMF.
Australian,
Okay.
back then, and I was on council and workplace rep. So I've been involved with the union movement really all my life, in one way or another, and more recently helped with the aged care campaign, the ACTU aged care campaign, or the QN aged care campaign.
Okay, but so you've been involved in healthcare then for most of working in healthcare?
All my life was healthcare, different roles, building, using my nursing background, sometimes employed as a registered nurse, other times just on the basis of the qualifications I had. Some of the roles in RFDS didn't require the nursing registration, but my mental health background in nursing.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. And so, how long have you been here in Cairns?
I came to Cairns in '95. I first came to Cape York to work as a nurse manager, actually, in Cape York, and then after a couple of years, I thought I was a good place to base myself. I wanted to continue remote area work and that involved mainly FIFO type work. By that time, going out, I've worked out at Yarrabah as a midwife. But my last 10 years of my career was working out in the Gulf of Carpentaria in the communities out there, doing training with community-based workers in the field of mental health and social emotional wellbeing with a colleague an Aboriginal male colleague with specialty in DV and mental health. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty impressive.
It was very interesting. It was the best job I ever had, actually.
Yeah. Okay, so you've seen a little bit of Cairns. Obviously, you've seen the communities and the remoteness and some of the issues that they experience. We're here today, I guess, to talk about part of a national inquiry into price gouging. And we wanted to pick Cairns in particular because of that overlay and the overlap with the communities, to think about what's the impact of all of it. We've seen the national sort of inflation figures where prices are up, etc. But to sort of try and get a feel for what the local issues are, and are there any added disadvantages, working out of here, living in Cairns, and your experiences from community.
Well, from my perspective, I am retired now, so I've been living on a fixed income, supported through my superannuation. But I'm finding, actually, for me, even although I'm in a relatively good position, I believe that I can't. I've depleted my savings in the last year or so now, and because I used to always be able to save a bit extra for unforeseen, non-essential type items, holidays, things like that. Haven't been able to accumulate that. I've had to drop. Insurance is an area that really hits us in the north. I believe we're disadvantaged disproportionately and unfairly, where everyone else has different climate issues and events, adverse events that affect their insurance coverage, like floods and fires. We get hit for cyclones, but at a much higher level than other people. And it's an issue we've been bringing up. But in the end, I've had to drop my insurance. My contents insurance, and this year for the first time I'm starting to look whether I can actually afford to insure my car. That's not quite the same issue, but it's just because the money's getting tighter. I'm finding my fixed income's only covering the essentials really now.
So do you own your own home, or are you renting?
I do own. It's a unit, so there's ongoing and increasing costs, not dramatically, but always on the increase, the costs of body corporate costs.
Yes.
So the same household costs. Appreciate the assistance with electricity rebates we've had this year from the state government. Really made a big difference. That's really helped. I checked my food bills have gone up probably 30% in the last year. I did a bit of bank categorises my spending, so I can have a bit of a look back and compare. There's just not the money. I've had the other thing we pay extra for up here often is for healthcare, to access healthcare. I've had some quite serious health issues about 3 years ago, and to get the access I needed urgently, I had to go to Brisbane and the Gold Coast for that. Well, I was able at that time to afford to travel, to travel, which I don't know what I'd do now if I had to come up with that sort of money again, with accommodation and fares, and then not being able to travel after, staying locally.
So can I ask you, are you paying private health insurance?
Yeah, I am, and I'm sticking with it because
you believe
we really are. I've been seeing some specialists who, 2 of whom have stopped coming to Cairns now.
Right.
In the time I've been seeing them for 2 different types of disorders.
So you're not insuring contents. You're thinking about not insuring your car, but you're hanging on to health insurance because of your own health issues.
Well, and because of my own health history too.
Yeah, but you're having to make choices.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I've cut out what I call non-essential spending. Like I'm not eating out so much. I stopped drinking alcohol. I wasn't a big drinker, but when I look back, you can spend up to 50 to 100 over a month.
Yep.
That's off the bill now. That's money I have access to now that seems to be absorbed.
So you tighten the belt on your food and essential sort of.
And I have what I consider a reasonable standard of living. I haven't had to compromise on food costs, luckily, but I haven't had any big health costs, I haven't had anything particularly out of the ordinary. You start to wonder about car servicing and things like that.
I was going to say, so fuel costs, what are you finding?
Well, it's actually been up and down a bit here. It's not dramatic like the remote locations, but you have to take that if you want to do a trip out, which I used to do a couple of trips each year. I haven't done it I've done one this year, but close.
Yep.
I used to do quite long trips out to the Gulf and catch up with people I knew, and out that way. That's very expensive when you start adding up, filling up a vehicle.
Yeah.
To go out to those areas. So I haven't done those trips. So cutting down in a range of ways, really.
Fair enough. And so what do you think about when you hear things in the news all of the time about, the big bank profits? Today, National Australia Bank, $7.4 billion profits. Woolworths and Coles, over $1 billion profits in the last year. Woolies groceries have made 20% extra this year than last year. What do you think about that?
I think it'd be nice if it was shared around with the consumers. We seem to be paying for their profits. You don't mind if we're all tightening the belt, but that's not the case. And it's the same with insurance companies. They're doing all right while our insurance goes up, So, no, I'm not happy about that at all, and you're trying to think, is there somewhere else to go? But we don't always have a lot of options, quite as many options as you might have in an urban area in terms of getting away from the big two and those
restricted competition. Even then, there's still not enough. The competition's
and I think those vendors, like I go to the markets and we have some people who get their produce from locally, but they're all coming from regions where huge fuel costs and costs on farm costs, I think, that affect them quite. So I'm not noticing a dramatic difference in the costs if you're going to these alternative options anyway.
Right.
You get a special. I look for specials. I'm always eye out for seasonal foods that are because they're cheaper. That sort of thing. That's a bit of what I've always done anyway.
Okay. So what do you think might be some of the answers?
I'm not sure I've got that. I would like to see help for people who are in people with families, people with fixed incomes in rental properties that are under the pump and with children. I think they're the people who should be focused on.
So working families, ordinary working families.
Working families, absolutely, because they're not necessarily high wage industries up here either. They're not like
Yeah.
the big cities.
So we
where-
have a lot of hospitality and retail and tourism in Cairns and
you know,
healthcare.
it's
Yeah.
fairly big here. And then of course you've got the agricultural sector.
Mhm.
And I don't really know. I mean, they seem to be a lot of the visa workers. So I'm not quite sure how well they're looked after. And yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, I don't know. No, not really. It's just that, yeah, prices are going up, and please focus on rural areas. I find always, my background in health taught me this because I was an activist in the health industry, in remote area health and that sort of thing, is that people in urban areas don't get the difference with regions and remote particularly.
Yeah.
The costs and limitations on access and availability of a whole range of services and facilities, and the very serious deprivation actually that exists in quite a lot of remote communities is not well understood, or because people don't get to see it,
Yeah.
and they're the people who really must get all, support and attention in terms of services. And I'm really not sure how you assist people. Have been calling for help to supplement food prices in remote communities for a very long time, but there's never been much satisfaction around that. And the availability is very restricted, and the cost just ridiculous, outrageous.
So it's pretty much like a market failure, isn't it, when we go into communities? And
I consider remote communities, remote areas, very much a market failure.
Yeah.
And it's and a service failure, to be honest.
Yes.
Inadequate housing, inadequate healthcare, everything's substandard. I shouldn't. Often, not always, and that's not to do with the people who live and work in those communities. It's that they expect people in remote areas to do the same, provide the same services where the costs are just outrageous.
Yeah.
So either they do with less, or they do with substandard because they're just not funded to the standard they need. So to me, that's the area. They're the area, the families and those remote communities, really, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Anne. Thank you for your time today. We appreciate that, and we will catch up with you.
No, thank you for the opportunity. It's good because we don't get at the voices of people in rural and remote, regional, rural, remote, heard that often, and it's certainly then circumstances aren't understood by those making decisions often.
That's it. So they need to, get out of Canberra and Brisbane a little bit more.
And listen to people. People can tell you. There's no question. People are happy to have a talk. We've got good technology now. There's no reason not to know these things and not to be taken. I always think it's one of those political things. They haven't got the voting power, so they just get ignored. And it's a bit criminal in now. Morally bereft in as far as some of the neglect and disadvantage. It shouldn't be the case in our country.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, let's hope we can shine a light on some of that and get
I
some
hope
answers.
So. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot for the
Appreciate
opportunity.
it.
See ya. I've got to shoot off.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So now we have Letitia Choppy, who's here from Cairns. She is an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander woman. I had the privilege of working with you for a short period of time, and thank you for that opportunity. We're here today really talking about a national inquiry into price gouging. So We know that workers' wages have been low for quite some period of time. In fact, they've fallen behind in terms of cost of living issues. At the same time, we're seeing, cost of living increases across a range of areas, so housing, transport, food, education, insurance. Tell me, what are you kind of seeing in your life and people that you know?
Firstly, to do with house insurance, house and contents insurance, especially in an area like Cairns. I'm a homeowner. My husband and I have been sort of researching or looking around to see what's the best quality house insurance that we can get. At the present moment, we're still scouting around and looking at that because we've let ours lapse a little bit, which is scary coming into the cyclone period. For us, our house and contents insurance has gone up 20% over the last 5 years.
Right.
And there's not very many, but there's certain groups have the monopoly on house insurance in this town. I don't know what it's like when you go, remote or rural. I mean, that is quite different again, but within Cairns itself.
Who we're talking about? Suncorp?
Suncorp, like people, the banks, some banks.
Yep.
Suncorp's the main one, insurance. I know Allianz is here, UE, is it UE?
Yep.
I can't say that one the wrong way. But UE is here. The major ones, RACQ. And a lot of people like in this town, and like people I know and friends of mine and family, like to go with the quality insurers because they know when there's cyclone periods around, or we have some unnatural weather patterns here. Going through those quality insurers, you're going to get bang for your buck and get like things will turn around in quite a quicker time period than say the smaller insurance companies. And the quality insurance quality of insurance in house and contents. Up here, you can't really let your insurance lapse over time because it's difficult for first home buyers. It's also difficult for people who have families. Like, for example, my stepson, he and his partner bought a house, and with the rate rise, it's just like unbelievable. And I've just had twins. So it doesn't help when these rises keep going up and they both work.
Yes. Yeah.
So if that goes up, it's a domino effect on everything else in the household of living expenses. They also have a 17-year-old getting him off to school, or he's finishing school. But all those other costs add in that outside of city areas, it really impacts in regional, remote and rural areas. Especially when you get past Rockhampton, it seems that the cost of everything just goes up so much that all the money seems to be concentrated in the big areas like further south in the southeast pocket of Queensland. So it's really unfair and unequitable and unjust for people that are really doing it hard. In the insurance area, you have to... there's so many different questions, and if we had a really good quality insurer or people that are aware of the challenges that people live in these particular areas, there might be some equitable outcomes in regards to that. And then there's others that they dangle a carrot and say, well, we can do this or we can do that. But when push comes to shove, it doesn't really happen that way. Or if something like a cyclone does happen, it takes a long time for people to get back on their feet, and hence all the, like I said, a domino effect happens. Mental health, lose their job. It's just one thing after another.
Okay. So what are you experiencing in terms of food prices here? You've seen... at your own personal groceries.
We have the big groups like Woolies and Coles, and then you have the IGA franchise that's around town. That's it. We don't have Aldi. Aldi. They're the only ones in the little small store owners, and they're being pushed out by Coles and Woolworths. And if we had more competition within this town, it'd make it fairer. Even though, the people... Coles and that, they bring the prices down, they say that, and Woolies, it still hurts in the hip pocket of families, or of even if you're single as well, you know, and you're on a certain amount of living wage, it hurts as well, not only just families, small, big families.
So have you noticed any particular increases
Yeah.
that's changed your spending habits?
Toothpaste.
Toothpaste,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's very sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
After going to the dentist just a few weeks ago, the toothpaste, that's very expensive. Little treats like chips, especially in the chip sector, nuts, various like milk, I shouldn't say milk has gone up.
What about fruit and veg?
Yeah, it depends on what the gluts may be. So we had a glut of pineapples not long ago, so that was very cheap.
Right.
But sometimes it can be like avocados, excuse me, tomatoes, but it has the road miles from down south at times.
So extra transportation.
And then when you get the delivery, it's not that fresh. It's either wilted or, you know,
so that's
doesn't
even
last
here
too
in
long.
Cairns?
In here in Cairns as well.
So not just communities.
Yeah. I think down every aisle, there are certain aisles within a supermarket, the prices haven't gone up, for example, like flour or things like that. But when you look at eggs, that is very expensive in buying. Cheeses, like things like that. Certain cold meats, if you want to go to the deli section, that's really gone up. Expensive. And with Christmas coming on, people like to get their things up here pretty early and stock their cupboards. Well, like if you don't shop early, when you actually get to the third or the second last week or the last week of Christmas, those prices are just horrible. They're just blowing
out. You're seeing prices actually increase as Christmas comes through, because they know that people are going to be spending then.
And they flash the little signs up for you know, like excuse me, in the entertainment area, around the nuts and the chips and the little bickies and all those sort of things. I noticed they go up a bit in price, or buy two for this price. And you think, well, it really wasn't that price a couple of months ago. You know, why is it this price now? So, for example, I was only in the supermarket yesterday and looking at deli chips, and you buy two packets for like $9 or something like that. Whereas I remember about 12 months ago, chips weren't at that price. They were cheaper. Very much cheaper than that. Other things like toiletries, like women's toiletries.
Yeah, they've gone up too.
Yeah, just a little bit. I've noticed that. I don't know how the pensioners cope with that. I see them on their days when they get their payments and things in the supermarket, and you know, they like the outing, they like the little treats and that too, and they might have little pets, different things like that have gone up, pet food in the supermarket. Things like toilet paper, the essentials, they seem to have hiked it up $1 or $2 without you even knowing. Sometimes you might go in and go, oh, well, that wasn't that.
So we saw prices for a lot of essentials go up during COVID.
Yeah.
Have they, in your view, have they stayed the same price, or have they gone further?
It's like a roller coaster, up and down.
Up and down?
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you get up this area and even further past Cairns, it is just unbelievable, the prices. So like, it's just ridiculous. I mean, if you go into remote areas like the Torres Strait or the Cape or the Gulf, a bottle of milk can be anything from $6 to $10, you know, like just a normal
2-litre bottle of milk.
Yeah, and bread can be horrible price as well.
Yeah.
Because, and then those things going to rural, remote and geographically disadvantaged areas are not fresh by the time they get off the boats or by the truck. They've had all those legs, sea legs or road legs. It's not that fresh. The refrigeration might break down. So like,
so the quality's not as good anywhere near as when it gets there.
But people just go and buy it anyhow, yeah.
Because they don't have any other choice.
No, and you wonder why when people come in from out bush, or doesn't matter whether you're on mainland Australia or in the island groups, they just buy it really big, and you wonder why they buy in bulk and different things. I mean, I did when I was teaching in remote areas. The quality of goods was not good at all, not fresh.
Yeah.
And you need fresh because that counteracts things like the health problems,
Yes.
you know, like you want to provide for your family, having those nice things, but you can't do it because the price is too high.
Yeah.
And that's like insurance in those places too. People own their own property, or hence with housing and stuff, you know, there's the overcrowding of people coming in, living in the same place together, so can't afford things. So
Okay. All right. So overall costs are up right across the board. People are having to make choices.
That's right.
Between paying certain bills, depending on your family circumstances. What do you think needs to happen?
I really think there needs to be a review into all of this with housing, especially in the housing area, to do with insurance companies. And having some localized insurance quality insurance companies within our own regional areas that can go out there really quickly to the country areas as well and the remote areas, instead of coming from all the way from down in Brisbane or interstate. And you're ringing or you're sitting on a 1-300 or 1-800 number for about an hour or whatever, and you keep getting flicked to different people and they go, oh, what was that? And you have to keep repeating yourself. So, and we really do need quality insurers within this town that know what they're talking about, that understand it and have lived all these different experiences. So.
Yeah, okay. So people that understand local issues, which are impacting here.
Yes.
Anything else that you'd like to share with us?
Looking at the cost of living and why are we paying far more than some other areas, especially in fuel too. So I don't get that at times. So that really needs to, when you turn on ABC News, you're always hearing about down in Brisbane and around in Brisbane in those areas and how they've done it hard, they've had floods. And I'm thinking you never see us rarely see further north on the TV, and we've gone through horrific things ourselves. We're always hearing about the further south, and it's just a bit unfair and unbalanced and unjust in this state where we're all paying taxes and it seems to be flooding to main pocket of Brisbane.
Right, Southeast Queensland. So I think we made the point earlier that, you know, as such a big regional state, you know, at least half of the Queensland population lives outside of Brisbane. But you're saying they're not being looked at.
No.
All the attention goes into Brisbane.
That's right. And the people that are responsible for these various areas, like different politicians, they really need to be getting in there and listening to the people on the ground and doing something and working together or setting up some sort of thing and come to some sort of common consensus on on that sort of stuff, because there's a lot more, there's a lot of layers that happen.
So regional Australia needs to be listened to and looked at and addressed in terms of its particular issues, but also communities is also what I'm hearing from
with
you
some
as well.
follow-up, with a turnaround and follow-up, so people are aware what's going on, not fly in and fly, oh yeah, we've heard what you said, and you don't hear anything.
And then you don't hear anything back from them.
No.
Okay.
Stuff like that.
All right. Well, hopefully this inquiry will be able to shed some light on some of those issues and have your stories heard. And, you know, when that all kind of gets wrapped up, hopefully we'll get some politicians to from Brisbane and Canberra and other places, but hopefully they will start to listen. And that's, I guess, the objective of what we're here today. So thank you very much for your time and coming in and sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we're here today with the ACTU's price gouging inquiry here in Cairns. Our next witness is Robert Hill, who is the organiser for the Electrical Trades Union. He's also the president of the QCU regional branch. Welcome and thank you for coming along.
Thank you.
You are a long-term Cairns resident.
Yeah, I was born and bred in Cairns. Yeah.
That's as long as it gets.
That's as long as it gets.
Yeah. So, obviously we're here talking about price gouging. At the same time, workers' wages across the board have kind of been very depressed. They've gone backwards in real terms over the last decade. Cost of living increases are up, housing, transport, food, education, health, insurance, right across the board. We're seeing at the same time, a lot of, big corporate profits. National Australia Bank announced a $7.4 billion profit this morning. I think the banks are all up, the big four, $33 billion profit this year. Coles and Woolies over $1 billion profit. A lot of that coming out of 20% increase in the grocery section for Woolworths. Qantas, $2.5 billion, right? Like it could go on. What does that mean? So that's happening nationally. What does that mean for you here?
I think it's exaggerated as in the regions the further you get away from the metropolitan areas.
Yep.
And we even notice it when we travel an hour up the road to Mossman, or 4 hours out to Georgetown, or to go to Weipa, 8 hours away. I was in Weipa maybe a month ago. And an example I'll use is I bought a hamburger for lunch, a hamburger and a can of Coke, and it cost me $27.
For a hamburger and a can of Coke.
And a can of Coke.
$27.
So then you put that into perspective and you think, well, how does a family up there afford to take their kids out for fish and chips night, or against that cost of living pressure? Fuel at the time when I was up there was $2.43 a litre.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, that's a lot.
People in these areas are almost landlocked in these areas. They can't afford to go anywhere, and then they're subjected to these obscene prices. I did walk through the grocery shop up there, and a head of broccoli was $8. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The fresh food up there is so expensive. The same can be said when you go west, out to Normanton and places like that. You stop for lunch and it costs you an absolute packet. And that is against the prices in Cairns. And when I do travel to Brisbane, I notice how much cheaper it is for a cup of coffee for breakfast in Brisbane versus what it is in Cairns.
Yeah.
So, these people that live in these remoter areas are generally working for councils, those sorts of places that like to pitch themselves as lifestyle employers, but don't pay decent rates of pay, right?
Okay.
That doesn't pay the bills. These people have got to send their kids to remote regional areas for schooling.
Yeah.
They've got to travel for a day to see a dentist. You know what I mean? All of that adds to their cost of living. And it's get to the point where it's unsustainable.
Yeah.
It's really unsustainable. When you notice the difference, when you travel an hour up the road to Mossman, we got some big problems. Big problems. And Mossman itself is sustained by a sugar mill, 110-year-old sugar mill that's on its knees. They don't pay Hollywood wages to the people that live and sustain that community. Yet everywhere else in the community is charging these higher inflated prices because it's costing extra to get the food and products to that community. It's a vicious cycle. I don't know how we fix it other than give workers a decent pay rise so that they can keep pace with the cost of living.
So some parts of big business are running a campaign at the moment, basically saying that it's wages that are driving prices up. They're also running a campaign to block changes to the Fair Work Act. What would you say to them from Cairns?
But it's not wages that's driving inflation up. We know that, and most reasonable economists will agree that it's not. It's the profit gouging in these big businesses, which is driving prices up, driving the CPI up. You know, we even, my members are saying to me, CPI is not even a good measure, because, you know, even if you achieve a pay outcome that meets CPI, you still struggle to pay the bills because your rates, your insurances, everything is going up by more than what CPI is going up by. And the reality is that a CPI increase is actually slipping backwards against those bigger bills, and people are struggling to make ends meet. There used to be a principle in this country where a man, woman, and 3 children could live on a minimum wage. I know nobody in that situation now. There is nobody in this area that's in that situation.
Yeah.
And in fact, most families have multiple jobs, at least the parents both having jobs, at least one job each, to survive.
Yeah.
So we have got a problem in this country, and it gets worse the further away you get from.
So talking about, absolutely. Talking about those minimum wage workers though, so Cairns is fairly renowned for its hospitality and its tourism sector, which is a lot of small business who do pay minimum award wages. What are you seeing in that space, people that you know? How are they faring?
Yeah, absolutely struggling. Like, you know, the retail and hospitality sectors. I remember a few years ago, you know, it was said that the retail and hospitality workers, if they gave up their penalty rates on the weekend, they'd be able to employ more people in that sector. That didn't happen at all. You know, Cairns is a tourist town. When people, when a business, let's pick a restaurant down the Esplanade, they employ people to wash dishes, to serve dishes, to cook dishes. And what drives them employing people is more custom. It's not whether they got to bank your penalty rates or not. It's how many people come through the door to buy a dish. That's what generates the employment. What encourages people to come through the door and buy a dish is a few extra bickies in their pay every week, so they can afford to take their wife out for dinner or their kids out for lunch. Or that's what generates the custom, which generates the employment. People in that sector are struggling. My son works in hospitality, and he often hits me up for a loan. So I do know.
How old's he now?
23.
Yeah.
You know, I'm encouraging him to get out of that sector for that reason. That sector has been left behind. It's like 15 years in history. You know, wages haven't moved. People are really struggling. The minimum wage is not a safety net anymore. It's not. People on the minimum wage are not keeping pace with the cost of living. So if it is that a minimum wage is supposed to be a safety net, it needs a big overhaul.
And I understand your partner, Ali, is a hairdresser. And she's also facing some increased issues in that space. And I know I just was talking to my own local hairdresser the other day, and she was telling me she's experiencing a 20% increase in the last year in hair products that she has to use, so hair dye and all of those things that the old hairdressers use. What's your sort of take on that?
Yeah, 100%. And it's not just her; it's so many small businesses, right? That you know, if they put their profit up by that 20% across the board, they lose the business because people can't afford that, right? So they have to absorb it through their profit margin, and it's getting really, really tough. It's getting to the point where, you know, people are having to make the call between employing people and not. You know, I talk to a lot of Sparkies around town. The cost of products have gone through the roof. The cost of copper has, you know, gone through the roof since COVID. Yet they've still got a quote at prehistoric levels to get the job, because it's such a cutthroat industry, right? And their profit margins are being eroded.
Do you know why that price of copper is so high?
I believe through COVID there was an international shifting of materials throughout the world sort of constricted, and therefore mineral prices increased, and it become, you know, a bit of a bidding war, and it just hasn't returned to
But
normal.
it hasn't returned back to normal.
That's the problem. See?
Yeah. Okay.
So, but yeah, I see that in day-to-day Sparkies as well, like competing to try and get the work in the first instance. That's the other part of a double-edged sword, Jacqueline, is that in Brisbane or Sydney, you might have these major construction projects that you can be reasonably comfortable that you're going to earn a decent living for a period of time. The further you get away from those metropolitan areas, the cycle is boom and bust, and you don't have that surety of a decent wage coming in like you do in a bigger city. So that exacerbates the problem, right?
Yeah. Okay. The other thing is, and you would see this, you have to travel to Brisbane a fair bit with your work. What are the prices of airline tickets like?
Yeah, ridiculous. And once again, gets worse as you travel further away. So,
and does the price vary depending on the time of the year, or
school holidays? Like if you were to fly, and I do sometimes have to go up to TI. If you fly during school holidays, you can expect to pay $800 for a flight to Thursday.
Thursday Island from Cairns.
Yeah. Oh, to Horn Island and then ferry across. Yeah.
Yeah. One way or?
No, that's a return flight. But that, how long's it been since we've spent $800 on a flight to a major capital city in Australia? Return. You know what I mean? Those sorts of prices.
And who flies to the islands?
That's Qantas.
Just Qantas.
There is Rex to
Rex
it as
Airlines,
well. But I don't know who else. Sorry. But I usually fly one of those two to go to Horn Island. Weeper's expensive to fly to. Once again, it's a captured community, to get out of it. Costs you a fortune either by fuel prices or air prices. It's so ridiculously expensive to travel from a remote area. Absolutely. And then when you hear Qantas making $2 billion profit, and
$2.5 billion, I think it was,
and their CEO pocketing millions of dollars in an ex gratia payment, you think, what
kind of a bit crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's not fair. Yeah,
it's not fair.
Yeah,
and the people that are hurting are the people that can least afford to.
Yeah, so that's working families, it's small business, retirees,
100%.
Yeah, across the board. Okay, and obviously people living in community are affected even more. By some of this stuff. What would you like to see happen?
I'd like to see a very mature conversation around what is actually driving inflationary pressures. I think that's the key to all this. I think we've been hoodwinked into believing that working class people are the problem when they're not. I think we've been hoodwinked into believing that we're greedy for just wanting to keep pace with the cost of living. If we had the gall to ask for a 7.3% pay increase, like how extravagant is that? But that's what the figures are showing us the cost of living is doing to us. As I said to you before, that the harvester principle in 1907 was that a man, woman, and 3 children could live on basic wage, on a minimum wage. Somewhere along the line, we've lost that a long time ago. If it was that was unaffordable, it was unaffordable in 1907, 116 years ago. But we've been hoodwinked as working class people into thinking that it's unaffordable now. Understand what is driving inflation, and that is the big business profits that are going into offshore bank accounts or whatever they do with them. The billionaires putting their stacks of money beside existing stacks of money, which are driving prices through the roof, and people just can't afford that. My son's rent went up by $70 a week. $70 a week. His pay hasn't gone up by $70 a week in the last 5 years. Where do you find the extra $70 from? You find it from maybe not going out for dinner, maybe not taking his girlfriend to the movies. So that money doesn't circle through the
local economy.
It's I don't know how to explain it. more succinctly than that. And I heard the last witness talk about insurances. I actually did shop around for insurances on my place recently. I rang a number of them. There was only 2 that would insure my place,
Right.
in Cairns. So.
And who's that?
CGU and UE were the only 2 that would insure.
And why is that? Is that because of the cyclone issue, or?
Apparently, my place, which is up at the back of Edmonton, which is something like 17 metres above sea level, is at flood risk.
Right.
And it's at flood risk because behind me, in the mountain range behind me, is the dam that feeds the whole area. So if the dam will bust,
so there's a whole area up there then that's going to be in the same situation.
The whole of Cairns will be.
Yeah. Okay.
So how many places in Australia are not cannot get insurance because the dam wall in their area might bust? That's ridiculous,
sounds
right?
Crazy, yeah.
I think really it is that they're risk averse. They know that it's a cyclone area and they really don't want to.
They don't want to insure in the area and do business in the area.
So they find any excuse.
So we've got restrictive competition. We've got insurers pulling out. not wanting to do
100%.
The basics that people need.
So good luck shopping around when they know that there's only 2 players in the market.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's you talk about price gouging. It's long got on my gate, I suppose, that if 2 businesses were to collude and say, well, this is what I'm charging out at and this is what I'm charging out at, that's unlawful, right? That's not allowed.
Supposed to be, yeah.
But we drive down the main street and every petrol station advertises their prices. And when one petrol station puts their price up by 5 cents a litre, what do you think the other ones do? They just walk out on the footpath and go, oh, yeah, it's 5 cents. Sweet. You can't tell me that that's the cost of the fuel that they've bought, because they all go up like that.
Yeah.
Same with interest rate rises. The banks.
I was going to ask you about that. So what do you think about the latest RBA hike? And obviously some of the banks have already flowed that on.
It's greed. It's absolute greed. I had a home loan when interest rates were coming down. It would take banks days, weeks to pass on those interest rate reductions. It takes them hours to put them up. It's greed. That's all it is.
Yeah.
The other day was it Commonwealth Bank made $7.3 billion worth of profit. That's almost $1 million an hour. While people are struggling to pay their mortgages.
Yep.
That's ridiculous.
Yep.
That's just greed. Greed on greed on greed. And that's built on their profits from the previous years and the previous year before that.
Yeah.
When do we get as a society to a point where we go, enough's enough? We need to equalise, I suppose, and bridge that gap between the haves and the have-nots, because at the moment we are reducing our middle class. We are losing our middle class in this country.
Yep. And I like to say we're really getting a divisive kind of haves and have-nots, right? But it's more and more of the have-nots and people being squeezed out of basic essential things in life. We shine a light on what's happening. What do you think needs to happen next? What needs to happen in this area to make any difference?
I think the government really need to drive solutions through employment. I think they, and be responsible about their increases. So, for example, even local government. I've got Sparkies that work for the council that haven't kept pace with the cost of living over a few cycles. Excuse me now, and the council hide behind the fact that we can't increase wages because we'll increase rates. But they increase rates anyway. They've got a part to play in this. The wages bill of a council is one small component, right? And people need to be able to survive in the community that they live. Otherwise, they'll just drain into other communities. So government need to play a part in this. They need to drive that the wage floor, if you like, through their government departments, and not be
So
ashamed.
you're saying we need to lift real wages?
100%.
Mhm.
And not be ashamed of lifting real wages.
Mhm.
That's what we need to do.
Mm.
And they set the bar, and then the rest of the community will have to follow.
So you don't agree then with big business proposition that it's a wages price spiral?
No,
Mm.
because if you put, you know, at the moment, as I said to you before, that at the moment, what we're seeing is people are just robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Mhm.
You know, putting off buying their daughter's school shoes so they can afford to pay their electricity bill.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you take that stress off people, and maybe just maybe took some of those billions off the people that are banking these obscene profits, you distribute the wealth a bit better, and it'll actually work to keep everyone employed, keep the economy ticking along, and it might actually do something about keeping cost of living under control.
Okay. Anything you want to add in terms of what needs to happen for places like Cairns, regional Australia, and also community?
Well, absolutely. My heart goes out to those that live in remote communities because they've been left behind. There needs to be government, I believe, government intervention in getting goods and services to these places at a reasonable cost. As I said, you know, when you pay $8 for a head of broccoli, you know, it's no wonder that we have all these add-on socio-economic problems, health problems that ultimately we all pay for anyway, because people can't afford to eat properly in these places, right? They'll take the bag of potato chips because it's cheaper than a head of broccoli. You know what I mean? That's when you're faced with that sort of choice, that's wrong.
Yeah.
We're in Australia. We are a lucky country. We shouldn't have to be subjecting people to those sorts of choices. You shouldn't have to choose whether you buy a $27 hamburger for lunch.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And government does need to intervene because they've left it to the private sector, and this is the result.
Yeah.
You know, there is greed out there. There is price gouging out there. There is, and as I said, those remote communities, they know they got fish in a barrel. Where are you going to go? You know, you can't go down the road and get a wrap for $5.
Yeah.
Because I'm the only place in town. You got to buy my hamburger for 27. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So we once upon a time used to have government-owned butcher shops in Queensland.
100%.
You know, because there was no market to start with. So you're saying that we need to consider having government services go into communities.
100%. And then what that does at least is set the competition. You know, as I said to you before, the wages is one aspect, but it sets the competition, it sets the price. Because if you know you can go to the government-owned butcher shop and buy a steak for a decent amount of money, the other butcher shops have got to follow, right?
That's it.
It's unfortunately we've got to the position in this country where government does need to intervene because the private sector's having a laugh. We used to own airlines. We used to set competition. We used to set rates. And it was very competitive and it was profitable. Now we're poking millions of dollars into the CEO's pocket, and then it's at the expense of everyone else.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Robert. It's been really interesting to talk to you today, and great to get a good perspective across the board from a regional perspective, but also some of that insight into some of the remote communities is really valuable. So thank you for your time.
No worries. Thank you.
Well, welcome back to the ACTU price gouging inquiry today being held here in Cairns. Our next witness is Liam. How are you?
I'm well, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Now, Liam, I understand you work locally and you've lived here all of your life. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, born here, went to TAS, did an apprenticeship with Ergon, been there ever since, 20-year career, love it.
Okay.
Wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, and became an ETU delegate about 7 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah, wouldn't trade that for anything in the world either.
Yeah, okay, all right. So tell us what's happened. There's been a lot of focus on, I guess, increased prices and pressures post, during COVID, but still, post-COVID now, and we've seen cost of living increases, across housing, rent and mortgages, transport costs, food costs, insurance and the like. And you've heard a couple of the other witnesses here today. Tell me what that's like for you. I think you're probably on a reasonable wage.
Yeah, look, but I'll start with my soon-to-be wife. She's a small business owner in Cairns, and she's been starting to struggle paying her things. She had a staff member leave not too long back, and she can't afford to put another one on.
Right.
It's hard for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But myself, yeah, you're right. Had a very fortunate career and a good wage, and I'm starting to feel it. The bank account, even though there's savings in it, starts to go backwards little bit by little bit.
Yeah.
Every week you get your pay, and it wasn't what it was the week before, and it's just going backwards, slowly but surely.
So what are you seeing are the big areas of impact for you?
The one that I'm weighing up at the moment is health insurance. We don't get much bang for our buck for private health insurance up here in Cairns, but you get hit at tax time whether you have it or not.
Yep.
Or whether you do have it.
Yeah.
So that would probably be my expense. That will probably be the next to be cut off.
Do you know how much that is a month?
It's about 500 and something a month. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's quite high, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but it's an expense that we're not seeing anything for it.
Yeah.
So we're looking to get rid of it, even though we're probably going to have children at some point. And well, yeah, we can't afford it.
Yeah. And what about other forms of insurance?
House insurance is a big one.
Yeah.
I tend to pay by the year. So I don't notice it come the 12 months, but it's coming up soon. So I've had to tuck money away for it, which, like I said, with the bank account going backwards, this is going to be another hit.
Yeah.
By then the time I pay it, that 12-month figure. The insurances are the big ones, I suppose. They're the stuff that you don't take on board as essentials until you need them.
Until you need them, that's right. Yeah. And so other witnesses have sort of said that, the house insurance, whether that's the home insurance and or contents, has significantly gone up here, and there's restricted insurance or insurers that are here. What are you sort of seeing in that space?
I've always been with RSEQ.
Yep.
I like to think they're supposed to look after Queenslanders what they say they do.
Yep.
Luckily, I've never had to use them.
Yeah.
But yeah, from what I hear, the minimum choice for what we have up here and some of the weird restrictions that they put on people makes it pretty hard. And given that they sort of promised to have an inquiry into that at the federal level, that hasn't eventuated.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And
I will say also, I've just been up to Stephen Island as well. So
right.
I've seen some of the food prices up there. Up in the Torres Strait.
And that's in the Torres Strait.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
We went down the shop to buy a.
So there's one shop.
There's one shop. Yeah, the Ibis on Stephen Island.
Yeah.
And like I said, your head of lettuce is $12. Your piece of meat is $20.
Yeah.
That's just for one T-bone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how up there they managed to get by on that, but they must be absolutely struggling.
Yeah. Okay. And so there's one shop on the island. Anything else has to come in by barge?
By barge, yeah. And I think from memory, that barge comes in once a month on a full moon with a high tide with the wind in the right direction.
Right. Okay. And what's the cost of the barges? Do you ever go across on that?
Oh, no, sorry. This is just Sea-Swift bringing the supply in.
Sea-Swift, yeah.
I do remember having a conversation with the power station attendant up there, and he was actually in discussions with Ibis about getting local supply and growing stuff closer on the island so that they can start to negate some of that cost for the islanders. So growing it on site and would be a good option for them.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And so just talking about do you own your own home?
Not yet. The bank owns it.
Yeah, no, like most people,
Yeah,
probably.
absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you think about the increase in rates this week?
It always hurts.
Yeah.
Always hurts. But what do? You got to pay it, don't you?
Yeah.
You got to find it from somewhere.
Yeah.
And either that means you don't get your packet of biscuits or whatever when you go shopping or whatever it is, but you just got to find it from somewhere. You can't go out and buy the meal in town. So the restaurateur doesn't get your money. Local industry suffer because the banks want their cut.
And so what do you think then about like the big banks, the big four banks profit of $33 billion a year?
It's just a bit rude, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think anyone needs that in the time when everyone else is hurting.
Yep.
And I think everyone's well aware of that. But at the moment, what do we do?
You have to keep paying it while you can and make some choices. Yeah. Okay. Any other sort of areas that you're sort of seeing?
Yeah, fuel out west.
Yeah.
So driving around for Ergon, I noticed the price of diesel by the time we got to Normanton was $2.40 for a litre.
Wow.
And that changed from $2.20 in sort of Mareeba on your way out. So there's a change of 20 cents.
Yeah.
Just to get all the way out there.
But $2.20 even in Mareeba.
There's a lot as well. Yeah. But that must hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember because when you get out there, normally you see the previous person's charge on the meter, and $500-600 for a tank of fuel.
Wow.
They're farmers, right? So they're filling up long range tanks.
Yeah.
Every week, I would assume every 2 weeks, or a week if you
Depending on the
huge cost to bear on the farmers that aren't getting the profits from woolies that are taking it.
Yeah. Okay. So you've heard me ask the same question of other people. What do you think needs to kind of happen?
I would like, on a sort of a zoomed out sort of a level, I'd like to see the RBA come up with some more levers other than the blunt tool that they continue to use that hit working people way more disproportionately than everybody else. I'd really like to see a little bit more thought go into that. If they're the clever people that they purport they are, let's see them come up with some more options.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to add?
I think that's about it.
That's about it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Liam. It's been very much appreciated.
Nice, thank you.
On
short notice, thank you.
Yeah, no. We very much appreciate you coming in. It's important to hear everyone's stories and get different perspectives from all around. But, again, important to hear from regional Australia. And good to be up here today.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so we're back here now at the ACTU price gouging inquiry here today in Cairns. We've had a number of other witnesses here, so you're our final witness for the day, Elida Faith. Welcome and thank you for coming. Just a few questions. So really just to set the scene, a lot of workers, I think, have, workers' wages for the last 10 years have definitely been down. The last couple of years they've actually fallen behind inflation.
That's right.
And we're seeing CPI, cost of living, increases right across the board, from housing to transport, food, health and education, but also insurance costs. What does that kind of mean for you here as a local person? And maybe tell me a little bit about, yourself and what you're sort of experiencing in your family, but also from people that you sort of might meet and engage with.
Thanks, Jacqueline, and thanks for having me today. So yes, my name's Elida Faith. I have been living in Cairns now for 23 years. I like to call it paradise. I'm a mother of one and a wife. I work for the Community and Public Sector Union as an organiser up here. But prior to that, 5 odd years ago, I worked for Centrelink for 13, 14 years. And obviously in that job, we spoke to some of the most vulnerable people every day, right across the board, people who are genuinely really doing it tough. And what I find interesting, but also a little bit alarming, is that when you're thinking about the cost of living or not having enough money to put a roof over your head or fuel in the car or the basics, you normally your mind would go to the people that who are either on a pension or a job seeker payment.
Mm-hmm.
And generally also we know we have a huge problem with homelessness now, right? Because people can't afford to pay their rent, but also there's not a lot of availability out there.
Yeah.
And I found, especially for us up here, it would be a certain cohort of people who were experiencing that. Generally people were looking for work, but now it's across the board. There are people who are working multiple jobs who are feeling the same stress, and that is alarming. I have travelled up to the Cape and the Torres Strait, which is a beautiful place. If you've never been, I encourage people to go. I'm sure they would love you to go and spend some of your dollars in their little area. They do it even tougher. And I don't think the majority of Australians really understand how expensive it is to live in these communities, and the Torres Strait especially. I mentioned that I'm a mother. So my daughter's 23. She moved out of home last year. I haven't got her to move back home yet, but I have been trying. And I find that we as a family, my husband and I, are also still helping her financially, because she can only get a casual job.
Right.
And the hours vary. And she's some weeks struggles too. Of course, the bank of mum and dad will always be there to assist her if we can, but that's also a strain on our family as well. And it's horrible to think that she's out there and struggling at the age of 23, like so many are.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people that I speak to when I'm out and about in the course of my job, but also just generally out chatting to people, as we do at the shops or at the hairdressers or whatever it may be, you hear on a daily basis how expensive everything has gotten, and how families are having to sit around their kitchen table and rejig their budgets regularly because they are now paying $12 for a tube of toothpaste, for goodness sakes. And we know that everything is going up. The cost of living has gone up. That's why you're here, obviously. And wages have not followed that. And people are genuinely finding it difficult to secure ongoing employment that would then give them that security to know that they've got a regular paycheck to be able to pay their rent, what they can afford. Can they think about saving to go on a holiday? Most can't, because they don't know where they're going to be in 6 months' time.
Yeah.
And for us up here as well, insurance, and I'm sure you would have heard this today, I'm guessing, is one of the biggest if you're a homeowner or a unit owner, one of it's gone up. I can't remember the percentage, but it is just escalated over the last couple of years. And because we're in a cyclone prone area, of course, we're paying more as well.
Yeah.
And then if you put on top of that your health insurance, if you can afford it, and most honestly can't.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we've already heard today from a couple of witnesses that they can't afford to actually take out contents insurance, and they're making decisions about whether I, choose to stay with health insurance and whatever. So there's a weighing up, which one do I go with, really? And for some people, it's all of them kind of gone. So Cairns is also itself, quite highly reliant on small businesses, and you mentioned the casualisation issue. And insecure sort of forms of work, and your time that you spend in Centrelink. What are you sort of seeing now?
I'm finding businesses, and yes, we certainly did suffer when COVID hit, most definitely. The issue that we seem to be finding now is businesses are struggling to actually find workers as well. Especially in certain skilled areas. I don't mean just sort of blue collar skilled areas, but retail. Correct. Yeah. People who want to come up from down south, for example, who doesn't want to come and live in Cairns? There is no accommodation up here. And or the accommodation that is available, the rent's just people can't afford it because the rent's gone up as well. And I presume, being a homeowner or a person that is renting their home out, they have to have their home insured, and that's extremely costly. So then the rent goes up, and it's just this knock-on effect. Small businesses are finding it tough also, obviously, because the cost of their ingredients or their goods have gone up as well. So they're trying to pass that on to the person who's buying it, and which means they can't have as many staff as they want, and that's just what I've been hearing from business owners that I've spoken to and seen out about, and just friends. And to be honest, and it was interesting over the last couple of weeks how many people had mentioned it was just such a slap in the face when the banks and these big organizations are talking about their billions of dollars of profit, and the little people just are struggling, and it's interesting how many people have actually said that felt like a slap in the face. I'm glad they made a couple of billion profit. I'm flat out trying to bloody get down to see my mother because I can't afford it.
So in your sort of work, you travel to Brisbane. You see a little bit of that. What do you think that, I think across the board people are hurting, but what sort of differences do you see in Cairns?
I think with Cairns, its availability of products is probably a little bit more limited as well. And obviously certain products that are, I'm just trying to think of examples. My head always is sort of looking at food type things. They just cost a little bit more up here. And I presume that is also because of the freight,
the transport,
especially when it comes to fruit and veg that we actually grow here as well. And so the big supermarket chains, it goes down, comes back. So I think they're some of the main things that stick out for me. And then again, if you go up to the communities or you go up to Thursday Island up in the Torres Strait, honestly, the average Australian would probably be very taken aback as to how much they pay for a piece of steak or a tin of formula for their child. We're talking. I remember a customer that came through from one of the communities when I was at Centrelink, he was a grandfather, and he said, I always buy my grandies a little Kinder Surprise. And do you know how much I'm paying for a Kinder Surprise? And I will always buy, he had 3 grandchildren. He said, and I always buy them one because I'm their grandfather. And he said he's paying $15 for a Kinder Surprise for his children.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, gosh, I haven't bought a Kinder Surprise for a long time, but I know we don't pay $15.
No, that's a very small piece of chocolate
Yeah.
for a very small piece of plastic inside.
That's
but
exactly right.
yeah, in terms of
Yeah.
cost and whatnot. Okay, so we talked about, I guess, food, insurance, mortgage rates.
Well, I have a mortgage,
Mhm.
like many Australians. I feel that I am lucky that I have a mortgage and,
Mhm.
and a home that will be mine and my husband's and my daughter's one day.
Yep.
And we are a two-income family. So again, I feel blessed. I really do, because so many of my friends aren't two-income families, and genuinely really struggles that they've never had in years past.
Yeah.
And the having that income is obviously a big blessing, but we are, having to reassess all the time. Every time the rates go up, we have to reassess our budget as well.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. And I have friends who are young couples in their 20s who took advantage of low rates, going back a couple of years ago. And they are thinking they might even have to sell the home because the interest rates keep going up and they just can't afford it because their wages are not keeping up with it.
Yeah.
They're just not.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as a union organiser, you would see what wage rates actually are. So inflation was at 7% in March this year in Queensland. I think it's at 5.4% at the end of September.
Yeah.
What are the wage rates like? Are they keeping up anywhere near that?
Certainly not. I think any person who's in a union or knows the unions or reads anything online, they are certainly not keeping up, and that is obviously why we have this issue. I work in the federal public service space, and a lot of our agencies, the jobs they do are very important. We have people who work for Centrelink who speak to some of our most vulnerable every day.
Yeah.
We have people who are protecting our borders.
Yeah.
We have people who are making sure no nasties are coming in to, which would have dramatic impact on our farmers. We have people who predict the weather. That's also important. Public service is a very important space, and there's huge pay disparity across the public service in itself.
Yep.
And we have some of the lower paid agencies. They are predominantly First Nations employed and women.
Yep.
And that is something the CPSU is addressing now, because we are negotiating for new agreements across the APS. But we actually have a table that shows the disparity, and it's huge. And you have the same people doing very similar work or classification, but it has not kept up in the last decade at all. And again, there is the problem. So you're having people and experience, and I would imagine this would be across the board in any type of employment area, not just in the public service space. But if you have people who are leaving, in fact, I was speaking to a fella last year who worked for the bungee jumping place here, and they were struggling to find anyone. Like, there is a certain, obviously, experience that you need to, I wouldn't say control the bungee jumping, but to
do it safely.
Do it safely, right? Thank you. I don't know what they're called, the bungee jumping gurus. But they couldn't find any experienced people in that area. And when they did, again, if they came up, business was slow because people have to cut back on a lot of those great fun things that they used to do, like taking the kids bungee jumping, or if you're going to go bungee jumping, or to the wave park, or out to Green Island or Fitzroy Island, or any of the other wonderful things that we have up here, because budgets are not stretching that far anymore.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have that whole issue about, whether you can afford to rent as well on top of that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's a very tight rental market here. You were saying before about, middle income people being affected by homelessness.
100%, 100%. And I know that's not just here, it is a national problem. But when you come to our communities and remote regions like Cairns, obviously it's exacerbated and it's tenfold. And it honestly, it keeps me up some nights because I know people who are homeless and not in a million years would they have ever thought they would find themselves in that situation. And these people also have jobs.
So where are they? Are they couch surfing? Are they in crisis accommodation?
You have, for up here in the region again, crisis accommodation is absolutely stretched, and so if you're lucky enough to get into crisis accommodation, I know people who are sleeping in their cars, and there are certain places that they know where they can sleep with other people that it's safe. And I have person staying with me at the moment, a young person, because and we're looking for places at the moment for her, and they're couch surfing and they are on the streets. It is really heartbreaking.
It's shocking, isn't it?
Yeah. And again, it's all that knock-on effect of, you know, yes, I'm working, I haven't got enough hours, I'm not getting paid enough, everything costs so much more, fuel is huge as well. So then that affects how far you can travel to when, you know, for work or job interviews.
Okay. All right.
It's grim, Jacqueline.
It sounds a little bit grim. Well, we know that it's grim. Yeah, it's grim across Australia. But like what we're here today is to try and work out, you know, how much more worse it is in regional centres, as well as obviously within communities. But thinking about all of that, part of this is about trying to get real people's stories about what's happening to people right across Australia. What would you like to tell Professor Alan Fells, who's chairing this inquiry for the ACTU and, you know, government really? What would be your answers to some of the problems that we're currently experiencing?
And that's such a good question. How long do we have? I think the important thing about this, and this is why inquiries are so great, is that we get to talk to you about what we're experiencing, and you're getting those real stories. And I think shining a light on what's happening rather than just, you know, reading it in the newspaper or something like that is so important, because you're getting those real stories of what's happening to people out there in the regions. And then obviously a government that is going to take that on board and genuinely listen to what's happening around Australia.
Okay.
And pinpointing it. I mean, again, I, as a family, and sometimes I feel bad when I say we're struggling sometimes, because compared to others, there's always others who are really struggling a lot more. I have a roof over my head, and I can put food on the table. But even we do find ourselves in a bit of a, okay, well, can we pay that bill this week? What's going to take? And no Australian should ever have to sit down and work out whether they have to be able, whether they can pay a bill or put food on the table for their children. And that's because wages need to be lifted, and they need to be fair, and they need to be kept up with the cost of living.
Okay, so there's definitely not a wages spiral in terms of wages inflation.
Definitely a wages spiral.
So we need a wages spiral.
Oh no, we don't need a wage. No. So no, I think I misunderstood your question.
No. So my question was really, do you? So big business is basically saying that there's that wages are forcing up inflation. You know, at the same time, we've got big business with massive, corporate sort of profits. Working families, small businesses are hurting. You know, what's your sort of take on all of that?
Look, I think, first of all, these big businesses need to reassess themselves. And obviously every business wants to make a profit. But when we're talking about these big massive billion-dollar profits on the back of your average Australian person, it's unacceptable. It's absolute pure greed, and that's certainly not lost on the average Australian. And also, we need these big businesses, the ones who aren't paying their taxes in Australia, they need to be paying their taxes in Australia. They need to be putting that money into Australia, so then the government has more money to provide better housing, to better services. Exactly, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So a fair contribution from big business
Yep.
back to the Australian people
Yep.
as well. They owe
Yeah.
us something in that space.
100%, Jacqueline, 100%. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it, unless you've got anything else you wanted to add.
I don't think so. I think you've covered everything off, and I'm looking forward to seeing the report and some of a lot of the other stories that you've been been hearing
Okay.
from around the nation.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay. Well, thank you, Elida. Thank you
Thanks.
so much for your time. We know you're a busy person, so
Thanks.
appreciate the time to come in. And yeah, thanks for sharing your stories.
Thank you, and thank you for listening. More importantly, I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Moni.
Thanks, Jacqueline.